Ambassador Sarah Chen stared at the data screen in her private quarters. The information had arrived from Earth 3 days ago, but she was still trying to believe what she was seeing. Hidden in the technical reports and investigation files was proof that would change everything. The attack on New Eden had not been random pirates. It had been murder. Captain Morrison sat across from her, his face hard as stone. "The evidence is solid," he said quietly. "Our deep space monitoring stations recorded everything. We just didn't know we had the recordings until our intelligence people went looking." Sarah scrolled through the files. Photos of ships that looked almost like pirate vessels, but with small differences. Weapon signatures that matched Zaphirian military equipment exactly. Communication intercepts in the Zaphirian language giving orders to eliminate all witnesses and make it look like raiders. "They planned this," Sarah whispered. "The whole thing. They wanted to teach us a lesson about asking for help." "Gets worse," Morrison said. He activated another file. "Look at this timeline. The attack happened exactly 2 days after your protection request was denied. The ships were already in position before the council meeting even started." Sarah felt sick. While she had been standing in the council hall begging for protection, Zaphirian warships were already moving toward New Eden. The people she was trying to save were already doomed. "How many people know about this?" she asked. "On Earth? Maybe 50, all high security clearance. Out here? Just us and the intelligence team that put it together." Morrison leaned forward. "The question is, what do we do with it?" Sarah already knew the answer. "We take it to the council. We demand justice." But even as she said it, she wondered if it would work. The Zaphirians had been part of the council for over 300 years. They controlled trade routes, military alliances, and the votes of dozens of smaller species. Humanity had been members for 2 years and had no real allies. Still, they had to try. The next day, Sarah requested an emergency session of the council. It took 3 days of bureaucratic fighting just to get 15 minutes on the schedule. When the day came, the Great Hall was only half full. Many delegates considered human business too minor to attend. Sarah stood at the speaker's platform with her evidence files loaded on the main display screen. Her hands were steady now. The anger had burned away her nervousness. "Honored delegates," she began. 3 weeks ago, I reported the destruction of the human colony, New Eden. At that time, we believed it was a pirate attack. I am here today to present evidence that this was not pirates. This was cold-blooded murder." The hall grew quiet. Sarah activated the first file. Images of the attacking ships appeared on the massive screens around the chamber. These photographs were taken by our automated monitoring satellites. As you can see, the attacking vessels have been modified to look like pirate ships. But analysis of their design shows they are actually Zaphirian military corvettes with false hull plating. A murmur ran through the hall. In the Zaphirian section, Kethvar stood up. "This is ridiculous. The humans are obviously fabricating evidence too." "I am not finished," Sarah said, her voice cutting through his objection. She activated the next file. "These are weapon signature analyses. Every shot fired at New Eden was from Zaphirian plasma cannons. Not similar to Zaphirian weapons. Identical to them." More murmuring, louder now. Sarah pressed on. "And finally, these are communication intercepts. Recorded messages between the attacking ships in the Zaphirian language, giving orders to destroy all civilian targets." She played one of the recordings. The Zaphirian voice was clear and cold. "Command confirms eliminate all colonists. Make it appear to be a standard raid. No survivors," the hall erupted in voices. Some delegates sounded shocked, others angry. The Zaphirian section was a chaos of clicking and hissing sounds. Kethvar's voice boomed over the noise. "Lies, these recordings are fabricated. The humans are trying to frame the glorious Zaphirian Empire for their own failures." Sarah had expected this. "The recordings have been verified by independent analysis. We invite any council member to examine them with their own experts." "Convenient," said another Zaphirian delegate. "The humans have had weeks to create false evidence. This is nothing but a desperate attempt to gain sympathy." The Trilaxian ambassador spoke up. "Even if these recordings are real, how do we know they came from official Zaphirian military forces? Perhaps they were rogue elements or criminals using stolen ships." Sarah felt the moment slipping away. She had known this would happen, but it still hurt to watch. The attack required coordination of at least 12 warships and support vessels. This was not the work of criminals. This was a planned military operation. Kethvar laughed, a sound like grinding metal. The humans accuse the Zaphirian Empire of mass murder based on questionable evidence and wild theories. We categorically deny these charges. The Zaphirian Empire has always been a force for peace and order in the galaxy. Other delegates began to speak. Some called for a full investigation. Others dismissed the evidence as inconclusive. The debate went on for hours, getting more heated and more complex. In the end, the council voted to establish a committee to review the evidence and make recommendations. Sarah knew what that meant. The committee would take months to reach any conclusion. Half its members would be Zaphirian allies. Even if they found proof, any punishment would be a slap on the wrist. After the session, Kethvar approached her in the corridor outside the hall. He was flanked by 2 bodyguards, but his manner was almost friendly. "Ambassador Chen," he said with a smile that showed too many teeth. "I hope you understand that nothing personal was intended by today's proceedings." Sarah stared at him. "Nothing personal? You murdered 50,000 people." "I murdered no one," Kethvar said calmly. "And even if what you claim were true, it would simply be the natural order asserting itself. Strong species survive. Weak species learn their place or face consequences." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Your species is new to the galaxy, Ambassador. You do not yet understand how things work. There are rules that govern civilized space. One of those rules is that lesser species do not make demands of their betters." Sarah's hand moved toward the weapon at her side, but Morrison caught her wrist. Kethvar noticed and laughed. "Violence in the council station? How very human of you. But you see, this is why your species will never be more than a minor annoyance. You think with your emotions instead of your minds." He straightened up and adjusted his ceremonial robes. "The committee will find that the evidence against Zephyr is inconclusive. Some pirates may have used weapons similar to ours. These things happen in a chaotic galaxy, and life will go on." As he walked away, he called back over his shoulder. "Perhaps next time your people will think twice before making unreasonable requests. The galaxy can be a dangerous place for those who do not know their place in it." That night, Sarah sent another coded message to Earth. This one was short. "Justice denied. Council compromised. Recommend alternative solutions." On Earth, the message was received by the same serious people in the same secure building. They had been expecting it. Some of them had lived through humanity's last wars. They understood how the universe really worked. Within an hour, new orders went out. Ships that had been waiting in hidden bases began to move. Weapons that had been stored in secret facilities were loaded onto transports. And in the deepest, most classified levels of human military intelligence, plans that had been prepared for exactly this situation were activated. The galaxy thought it had taught humanity a lesson. The strong ruled the weak. The weak accepted their place or suffered the consequences. Justice was whatever the powerful said it was. They were about to learn that humanity had different ideas about justice. Ideas shaped by thousands of years of war, survival, and the absolute refusal to let the strong prey on the innocent without consequences. The Zaphirian Empire had committed genocide and escaped punishment through politics and corruption. They thought the matter was closed. They were wrong. In the depths of space, human ships began to gather. Not the small, peaceful vessels the galaxy had seen before. Different ships. Darker ships. Ships built for war. The galaxy had made its choice. Now humanity would make theirs. And the galaxy would learn to fear the day they decided to murder human children. The massive space station hung in the void like a giant metal flower. Its silver petals stretched out in all directions, each one bigger than Earth's moon. This was the home of the Galactic Council, where hundreds of alien species came together to make decisions for the galaxy. Inside the Great Assembly Hall, Ambassador Sarah Chen sat in the small human section. The chair was too big for her, designed for the larger Zaphirian delegates who controlled most of the council. Around her, thousands of alien beings talked in languages that sounded like music, grinding metal or whistling wind. Earth had joined the council only 2 years ago. It was supposed to be a great honor. Humanity had finally proven they were smart enough to travel between stars and meet other species. But Sarah quickly learned that being a member and being respected were very different things. The Zaphirians ruled over 40 star systems. They were tall, with blue-gray skin and 4 arms. Their ambassador, Kethvar, looked down at all the smaller species like they were insects. When he spoke, his voice boomed across the hall. The Council will now hear requests for protection services, Kethvar announced. Sarah stood up. Her heart was beating fast, but she kept her voice steady. The human colonies request protection for our agricultural worlds. Pirates have been attacking our supply ships near the outer ring. A sound like laughter came from the Zaphirian section. One of their younger delegates made a clicking noise with his throat. Perhaps the humans should learn to protect themselves instead of asking for help like children. Sarah's face grew red, but she continued. Our colony ship New Eden has 50,000 farmers and their families. They grow food that feeds 12 human worlds. If the pirates attack the planet itself, pirates are a minor problem, Kethvar said, waving one of his four hands. The Council cannot waste resources on every small fear. The Trilaxian ambassador, who looked like a giant purple octopus, spoke up. The humans are new to space. Perhaps they do not understand how things work. Small species must learn to survive on their own. Sarah looked around the hall. None of the other species spoke up for humanity. The few that were friendly to Earth were too weak to matter. The powerful ones either ignored her or seemed amused by her request. We are willing to pay for protection services, Sarah said. Earth has rare minerals that... The matter is closed, Kethvar said. The Council has more important business to discuss. Sarah sat down, her hands shaking with anger. She activated her communication device and sent a coded message back to Earth. The message was short. Request denied. We are on our own. 3 weeks later, Sarah was in her quarters when the emergency alert came through. The message was from New Eden, but it cut off after only a few words. Under attack. Ships everywhere. They're bombing the farms. Then nothing. Sarah ran to the communication center. The technician, a friendly Altarian with soft fur and big eyes, was trying to contact New Eden. I am sorry, Ambassador, he said in his singing voice. There is no response from the planet. Sarah's blood felt like ice. Keep trying. For 6 hours they sent signals to New Eden, nothing came back. Then a merchant ship that had been near the system sent a report. Sarah read it 3 times before the words made sense. New Eden was gone. Not the planet itself, but everything on it that mattered. The cities were burning. The farms were destroyed. The orbital stations were twisted metal floating in space. The merchant ship had picked up some escape pods, but most of the colonists were dead. 50,000 people. Farmers, teachers, children, doctors, engineers, all dead. Sarah walked to the council hall in a daze. The session was already starting when she arrived. She stood up and asked to speak. Honored delegates, she said, her voice barely steady. I must report that the human colony of New Eden has been destroyed. 50,000 civilians are dead. There was some murmuring around the hall, but not much. Kethvar looked bored. Pirates, you said? Unfortunate incident. The Council expresses its sympathy to the human species. This was not just pirates, Sarah said. The attack was too organized, too complete. Someone with military ships and advanced weapons did this. Do you have proof of this claim? Asked the Trilaxian ambassador. Sarah looked down at her tablet. Earth's investigators were still studying the few pieces of evidence they had. We are still investigating. Then you should not make wild accusations, Kethvar said. Pirates have grown bold in recent years. This is why small species should develop proper defenses instead of depending on others. The way he said it made Sarah's skin crawl. There was something in his voice, a hint of satisfaction. She stared at him, and for just a moment she saw him smile. The Council will observe a moment of silence for the lost humans, Kethvar announced. Now we must discuss the trade agreement between Zephyr and Altair. That was it. 50,000 people reduced to 30 seconds of silence, then forgotten. Sarah sat down and tried not to show the rage building inside her. Around her, the Council moved on to other business as if nothing had happened. Later that day, Sarah met with Captain Morrison, the head of Earth's small security force on the station. He was a tough ex-military man who had fought in Earth's last wars before humanity reached the stars. Any word from the investigation? Sarah asked. Morrison's face was grim. Some interesting things. The attack patterns don't match any known pirate groups. Too organized, too efficient. And some of the weapon signatures look familiar. Familiar how? Similar to Zaphirian military tech. But that could be coincidence. They sell weapons to lots of species. Sarah thought about Kethvar's smile. Or it could be something else. That night, Sarah sent another coded message to Earth. This one was longer and more detailed. She reported everything about the Council's response, about Kethvar's attitude. about the weapon signatures. At the end, she added her own thoughts. "I believe we are not just on our own," she wrote. "I believe we have enemies who see us as weak enough to kill without consequences. Recommend immediate security review of all human colonies and trade routes." On Earth, in a secure government building, Sarah's message was read by people with serious faces and hard eyes. They had been waiting for something like this. Humanity had not survived and thrived on a dangerous planet by being naive about the nature of enemies. Within hours, orders went out to human settlements across known space. Emergency protocols were activated, ships began moving to new positions, and in secret facilities that most humans did not know existed, other preparations began. The galaxy thought it knew humanity. A young species eager to please, grateful to be included in galactic civilization. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The people of New Eden would be avenged, and the galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. But for now, Sarah Chen sat alone in her quarters, looking out at the stars and mourning 50,000 souls. She did not yet know that Earth was already planning its response. She only knew that something fundamental had changed. The galaxy was no longer a place of wonder and possibility. It was a place of enemies and prey. And humanity would never be prey again. Admiral Marcus Stone stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching the Zaphirian trade convoy through the viewport. 12 massive cargo ships carried rare metals and manufactured goods worth more than some planets. Their escorts were confident, flying in loose formation like they owned this section of space. They were about to learn they were wrong. "All ships report ready, Admiral," said Commander Park from the tactical station. Around them, the bridge crew worked quietly at their stations. No one spoke unless necessary. They all knew what was at stake. Stone nodded. "Begin Operation Harvest." What happened next took exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. The human ships appeared from nowhere, not from hyperspace or warp drive, but from some kind of stealth system the Zaphirians had never seen before. One moment space was empty except for the convoy. The next moment, 23 human warships surrounded them like wolves around sheep. The Zaphirian convoy commander tried to send a distress signal. The transmission was blocked by human jamming systems. He tried to run. His engines were disabled by precise shots that left the rest of his ship untouched. He tried to fight. His weapons were destroyed before he could fire a single shot. In less than 5 minutes, the entire convoy was helpless. The cargo ships were boarded by human marines who moved through the corridors like ghosts. The security guards never had a chance to resist. Most of them never even saw their attackers. "Cargo secured," reported Major Williams over the comm. "No casualties on either side. The Zaphirians are confused but unharmed." Stone activated his communication system and sent a message to the convoy commander. "This is Admiral Stone of the Human Defense Force. Your cargo is now property of Earth, as compensation for the murder of New Eden colonists. Your crews will be released unharmed in life pods near the next inhabited system." The Zaphirian commander's voice came back, full of outrage and disbelief. "This is piracy. The Council will hear of this. You cannot simply—" The Council had their chance to provide justice. Stone cut him off. They chose to protect murderers instead. Now Earth provides its own justice. The human ships vanished as quickly as they had appeared, taking the cargo with them. The Zaphirian crews were left in life pods with enough supplies to reach safety, but their valuable cargo was gone. More importantly, their sense of security was shattered. The attack on the convoy was just the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, human ships struck Zaphirian targets across 3 star systems. They hit mining operations, destroying equipment worth billions, but leaving the workers unharmed. They disabled communication satellites, cutting off entire worlds from the galactic network. They captured trade ships and stripped them of cargo, always releasing the crews safely. Each attack was perfect. The humans appeared without warning, struck with surgical precision, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. They seemed to know exactly where to hit and when. It was like they had been watching Zaphirian operations for years, learning every weakness and vulnerability. The Zaphirian military tried to respond, but their forces were designed to fight other civilized species in open battle. They had no experience with enemies who struck from the shadows and disappeared like smoke. Every time they sent warships to protect a target, the humans simply attacked somewhere else. General Vex Thule, the supreme commander of Zaphirian forces, studied the tactical reports with growing frustration. His forearms drummed against the table as he read about the latest disaster. "How is this possible?" he demanded of his intelligence officers. "These are the same humans who begged us for protection just months ago. How do they suddenly have advanced warships and military technology?" Colonel Earthnall, his senior intelligence aide, looked uncomfortable. "Sir, it appears we may have underestimated human capabilities. Their ships are using stealth systems we have never encountered. Their tactics suggest extensive military experience. They are a young species," Vex Thule roared. "They have been in space for less than 50 years. How can they know more about warfare than civilizations that have fought for millennia?" What the Zaphirians did not understand was that humanity had been preparing for this possibility since the day they joined the Galactic Council. While they presented themselves as peaceful farmers and traders, human intelligence services had been busy. They had studied every council species, learning their strengths and weaknesses. They had mapped trade routes, military bases, and communication networks. They had developed weapons and tactics specifically designed to fight against superior technology and numbers. Most importantly, they had learned from thousands of years of human warfare. Guerrilla tactics, psychological operations, supply line warfare. The humans knew how to hurt an enemy without giving them a chance to hit back. Admiral Stone stood in the war room of the secret human base, built inside a hollowed-out asteroid in neutral space. Around him, dozens of officers coordinated attacks across Zaphirian territory. The walls were covered with maps, target lists, and casualty reports. "Status report," Stone ordered. "Phase 1 is 90% complete," reported Colonel Martinez, his chief of staff. "We have disrupted Zaphirian trade operations in 7 systems. Their economic losses are approaching 200 billion credits. Military response? Confused and ineffective. They are trying to protect everything at once, which means they protect nothing well. Their forces are spread too thin to stop our operations." Stone nodded. The plan was working perfectly. The Zaphirians were powerful, but their power depended on their vast empire running smoothly. By attacking their infrastructure instead of their military, humanity was slowly strangling their entire civilization. "What about civilian casualties?" Stone asked. "Zero, sir. Every operation has followed strict rules of engagement. We are only targeting military and economic assets. Civilian populations are unharmed." This was crucial to the human strategy. They were not terrorists or barbarians. They were soldiers seeking justice for a specific crime. By avoiding civilian casualties, they maintained moral authority while demonstrating their precision and control. The psychological effect on the Zaphirians was devastating. Their mighty empire was being dismantled piece by an enemy they could not catch or predict. Every day brought new losses, new failures, new proof that they were not as powerful as they believed. On the council station, Ambassador Sarah Chen watched the emergency session with grim satisfaction. The Zaphirian delegates were demanding action against the human pirates who were attacking their territory. "The humans must be stopped," Keithvar shouted at the assembly. "They are conducting unprovoked attacks on peaceful Zaphirian civilians." The Trilaxian ambassador spoke carefully. Perhaps if the Zaphirian Empire had not dismissed human concerns about the New Eden massacre, this situation could have been avoided. "We had nothing to do with New Eden," Keithvar lied. "That was proven by the investigation committee." "The Bay committee found the evidence inconclusive," corrected the Altarian delegate. "That is not the same as proving innocence." Sarah stood to address the assembly. "The human government does not control the actions of independent military forces seeking justice for war crimes. If the Council wishes these attacks to stop, perhaps they should reconsider their investigation of the New Eden genocide." It was a diplomatic fiction, and everyone knew it. The attacks were too coordinated and sophisticated to be the work of rogue elements. But the fiction gave the Council a way to end the crisis without admitting they had failed to provide justice. Keithvar's face flushed darker blue with rage. You cannot negotiate through terrorism. Justice delayed is justice denied, Sarah replied calmly. When legal systems fail, other systems take their place. The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was becoming clear. The Zaphirian Empire was losing the economic war, and their political position was weakening every day. Other species were beginning to question whether the mighty Zaphirians were as invincible as they claimed. In his private chambers, Kethvar met with his closest advisors. The reports on his desk painted a grim picture. 3 more mining operations destroyed, 2 communication hubs disabled, a military supply depot raided and emptied. How long can we sustain these losses? He asked his economic minister. Not long, sir. Our trade revenues have dropped by 60%. Several client species are reconsidering their alliances with us. If this continues for another month, we will face serious internal unrest. Kethvar slammed one of his 4 fists on the desk. Then we must find these human ships and destroy them. With respect, sir, said his military advisor, we have tried. The humans are using tactics and technology we do not understand. Every time we think we have them cornered, they vanish. Then what do you suggest? The room fell silent. Finally, the economic minister spoke. Perhaps we should consider negotiations. Kethvar stared at him. Negotiations? With humans? We are the Zaphirian Empire. We do not negotiate with inferior species. Sir, the advisor said carefully. With all respect, the humans do not appear to be as inferior as we believed. Outside the windows of the Zaphirian embassy, space looked peaceful and empty. But somewhere in the darkness, human ships were moving toward their next target. The war was far from over, and the galaxy was beginning to realize that humanity was not the weak, frightened species they had appeared to be. They were something much more dangerous. They were Serv. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was the largest gathering in over a century. Representatives from every major species had come to address what the media was calling the human crisis. The great assembly hall buzzed with nervous energy as delegates discussed the impossible situation. For 6 weeks, human forces had been systematically destroying Zaphirian infrastructure across their empire. What had started as isolated attacks on trade convoys had escalated into a full-scale economic war. The mighty Zaphirian Empire, which had dominated galactic politics for 3 centuries, was being brought to its knees by a species that most delegates still thought of as primitive newcomers. Kethvar stood at the central podium, his forearms shaking with rage and desperation. His once proud bearing was gone, replaced by the hollow look of a leader watching his civilization crumble. Honored delegates, he began, his voice cracking slightly. The Zaphirian Empire formally requests immediate council intervention to stop the human terrorist attacks on our peaceful territory. The word terrorist sent murmurs through the assembly. The Altarian ambassador twitched his whiskers in what his species considered deep thought. Ambassador Kethvar, can you explain why your military forces have been unable to stop these attacks? Kethvar's face flushed darker blue. The humans are using cowardly guerrilla tactics. They strike without warning and flee before our forces can respond. This is not honorable warfare. Honorable warfare, repeated the Trilaxian ambassador slowly. Like bombing civilian farming colonies? We had nothing to do with New Eden, Kethvar shouted, but his voice lacked conviction. Everyone in the hall had seen the evidence. The only reason the Zaphirians had escaped justice was political influence, not innocence. Ambassador Sarah Chen rose from the human section. She looked different than she had months ago, harder, more confident. The galaxy had taught her painful lessons about power and justice. The human government has repeatedly stated that we do not control these independent forces, she said calmly. However, we understand their motivation. When legal systems fail to provide justice, people find other ways to achieve it. You must stop them, Kethvar demanded. The Council cannot allow terrorism to succeed. Sarah's eyes were cold as winter space. The Council had their chance to stop terrorism. They chose to protect the terrorists instead of their victims. Now they face the consequences of that choice. The Corithian ambassador, a crystalline being whose species had remained neutral in most conflicts, spoke in a voice like chiming bells. Perhaps the humans would be willing to negotiate if the Zaphirian Empire acknowledged responsibility for the New Eden attack and agreed to appropriate compensation. Never, Kethvar roared. The Zaphirian Empire does not bow to demands from inferior species. As if summoned by his words, every communication screen in the hall suddenly activated. The image that appeared made every delegate freeze in terror. It was space around the council station. But space was no longer empty. Hundreds of human warships hung in perfect formation around the massive station. Not the small exploration vessels the galaxy had seen before, but true warships. Dark, angular ships that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Ships that radiated menace and purpose. In the center of the formation was a vessel larger than anything humanity had ever built before. Its hull was scarred with what looked like battle damage, but the scars formed patterns. Deliberate markings. A ship that wore its history of violence like armor. The main screen activated and Admiral Stone's face appeared. He was wearing a black uniform that no one in the galaxy had seen before. Behind him, the bridge of his ship hummed with quiet efficiency and barely controlled violence. "Members of the Galactic Council," Stone said, his voice carrying clearly through the hall's speakers. "I am Admiral Marcus Stone of the Human Defense Force. I am here to discuss the terms of justice for the genocide committed against New Eden." The hall erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted in dozens of languages. Some demanded to know how the human fleet had appeared without detection. Others called for immediate evacuation of the station. A few just sat in stunned silence, staring at the impossible sight of human military power. Kethvar's voice cut through the noise. "This is an act of war. You cannot threaten the council station." Stone's expression did not change. "Ambassador Kethvar, your empire murdered 50,000 innocent civilians. Your government has refused to acknowledge this crime or provide compensation to the victims' families. The time for politics and denial has ended. The council will never bow to human demands," shouted the Trilaxian ambassador, though his multiple tentacles were shaking with fear. "The council is not my concern," Stone replied. "My concern is justice for New Eden. The Zaphirian Empire has three options. First, they can surrender the individuals responsible for planning and executing the attack. Second, they can pay full compensation to the families of the victims. Third, they can face the complete destruction of their military and economic infrastructure." Kethvar laughed, but it sounded hollow and desperate. "You think your little fleet frightens us? The Zaphirian military has over 10,000 warships. We have conquered dozens of species. We will crush you like the insects you are." Stone nodded to someone off-screen. Suddenly, every display in the hall showed a tactical readout of local space. The numbers were impossible to believe. The human fleet numbered over 800 ships. Every one of them was larger and more heavily armed than anything in the Zaphirian military. More importantly, they were positioned with mathematical precision around not just the council station, but around every Zaphirian military base and shipyard in the system. "Your nearest military force is 18 hours away," Stone said matter-of-factly. "They number 47 ships. We have analyzed their capabilities. They would be destroyed in approximately 12 minutes if they attempted to intervene." The Corithian ambassador's crystal body was flashing with patterns of deep concern. "Admiral Stone, how is this possible? Human intelligence reported that your entire military consisted of fewer than 100 ships." For the first time, Stone smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "Human intelligence has reported many things. Most of them were lies. We learned long ago that in a galaxy full of predators, the wise prey pretends to be weaker than it is." He gestured, and new images appeared on the screens. Massive shipyards hidden in asteroid fields. Weapons factories built inside hollow moons. Training bases where human soldiers practiced tactics that the galaxy had never seen. For 50 years since our first contact with galactic civilization, we have been preparing for this day. We studied every species, every military doctrine, every weakness. We developed technologies specifically designed to counter your advantages. And we waited. Sarah Chen stood again, and for the first time since the New Eden massacre, she felt something like hope. "Admiral, what are your demands?" "Simple," Stone replied. "Complete surrender of all Zaphirian military forces involved in the New Eden attack. Payment of 1 trillion credits in compensation to the victims' families. And a formal apology from the Zaphirian government acknowledging their guilt." Kethvar's face was now almost purple with rage. "Impossible. The Zaphirian Empire will never surrender to humans. Then the Zaphirian Empire will cease to exist." Stone said calmly. You have 1 hour to decide. The transmission ended, leaving the hall in stunned silence. Outside the viewports, the human fleet waited like predators around wounded prey. The Trilaxian ambassador was the first to speak. How did we get this so wrong? How did we completely misunderstand what humanity is? The Altarian delegate's fur was standing on end with stress. They have been among us for years, watching, learning, planning, and we never suspected. Sarah looked around the hall at the frightened faces of species who had dismissed humanity as weak and primitive. You saw what you wanted to see. A young species, grateful for inclusion, eager to please. You never considered that we might be something else entirely. What are you? Whispered the Corithian ambassador. Sarah's voice was steady and cold as space itself. We are the species that survived 10,000 years of warfare on a planet that tried to kill us every day. We are the species that built weapons capable of destroying our own world, then chose not to use them. We are the species that learned that the strong prey on the weak and decided we would never be weak again. She looked directly at Kethvar. You wanted to teach us our place in the galactic order. Congratulations, you have succeeded. Our place is wherever we choose it to be. In his private chambers, Kethvar stared at the reports flooding in from across the Zaphirian Empire. Human fleets had appeared simultaneously at every major Zaphirian system. Not attacking, just waiting. The message was clear. Surrender or watch everything burn. His military advisors sat around the table like mourners at a funeral. The greatest military empire in the galaxy had been outmaneuvered by a species they had considered beneath notice. Sir, his defense minister said quietly, I recommend we accept their terms. Kethvar wanted to refuse. Wanted to fight. Wanted to prove that the Zaphirian Empire did not bow to anyone, but the numbers were clear. Humanity had not just military superiority. They had planned this down to the smallest detail. They had been preparing for war. The surrender ceremony took place in the Great Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council Station. Representatives from every major species attended, but the mood was very different from the usual political theater. This was not a negotiation or debate. This was the reshaping of galactic civilization. Kethvar knelt at the center of the hall, his forearms bound behind him with simple metal restraints. Around him, 17 other Zaphirian officials waited in similar positions. These were the architects of the New Eden massacre, identified by human intelligence through months of careful investigation. Admiral Stone stood before them in his black uniform, flanked by human marines whose armor reflected no light. Behind him, Ambassador Sarah Chen held a data tablet containing the formal surrender documents. Kethvar of the Zaphirian Empire, Stone said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent hall. You are charged with genocide, conspiracy to commit mass murder, and crimes against sentient life. How do you answer these charges? Kethvar's voice was barely a whisper. Guilty. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Around the hall, delegates from species who had dismissed human concerns just months ago watched in stunned silence. The mighty Zaphirian Empire, reduced to kneeling criminals confessing their guilt. The sentence is life imprisonment on a human penal colony, Stone continued. You will spend your remaining years thinking about the 50,000 innocent people you murdered. Your personal assets will be seized to help pay compensation to their families. Sarah stepped forward with the formal documents. The Zaphirian Empire hereby acknowledges full responsibility for the attack on New Eden. They agree to pay 1 trillion credits in compensation over the next 10 years. They further agree to submit to human oversight of their military forces to prevent future war crimes. The Trilaxian ambassador's tentacles curled with distress. Human oversight? But the Zaphirian military is larger than any other force in the galaxy. Sarah looked at him with an expression that might have been amusement if it had been warmer. Size is not the same as capability, Ambassador. The last 2 months have demonstrated that quite clearly. She was right, and everyone knew it. The human campaign against the Zaphirian Empire had been a masterpiece of military strategy. They had crippled the largest fleet in the galaxy without losing a single ship. More importantly, they had done it while maintaining perfect discipline and avoiding civilian casualties. The galaxy had learned that humanity possessed not just superior technology and tactics, but superior restraint. They could have wiped out entire Zaphirian worlds, but they chose not to. They fought with precision and purpose, not mindless destruction. Admiral Stone activated a holographic display showing human ships positioned throughout Zaphirian space. Effective immediately, human forces will maintain peacekeeping stations in all former Zaphirian territory. Any attempt to rebuild military forces without human approval will be considered an act of aggression. This is conquest, protested the Corithian ambassador, her crystal body flashing with agitated patterns. This is justice, Stone replied calmly. The Zaphirian Empire forfeited their right to independent military action when they chose to commit genocide. They will earn back that right by demonstrating they can be trusted with it. But the ceremony was only the beginning. Over the following months, humanity reshaped the entire structure of galactic civilization. They did not do it through force or threats, but through the simple application of superior capability and careful planning. Human ships appeared in systems where smaller species had been bullied or exploited by larger ones. Suddenly, the Corvin mining companies could not strip mine Altarian colonies without consequence. The Trilaxian slave traders found their operations, mysteriously suffering equipment failures and navigation problems. Trade routes that had been controlled by powerful species for centuries were suddenly open to everyone. Communication networks that had been restricted to wealthy civilizations were expanded to include even the most primitive species. Sarah Chen stood in her new office aboard the human diplomatic station, orbiting the council world. Through the viewport, she could see the massive structure humanity had built in just 6 months. It was 3 times larger than the old council station, with docking bays for ships from every known species. Captain Morrison, now promoted to admiral, entered with the daily reports. The hegemony worlds have agreed to our new trade protection protocols, he said. That makes 47 species now operating under human security guarantees. Sarah nodded. It was not conquest exactly. Humanity did not claim territory or demand tribute. Instead, they offered protection and fair treatment to any species willing to accept human oversight. The alternative was facing the same isolation and economic pressure that had broken the Zaphirian Empire. Any resistance? Some grumbling from the older powers, but nothing significant. The Trilaxians are adapting faster than expected. They seem to understand which way the wind is blowing. Sarah was not surprised. The Trilaxians were pragmatists. They had seen what happened to species that opposed human interests, and they were smart enough to adapt. The transformation was not just military or political. It was philosophical. For thousands of years, galactic civilization had operated on the principle that might made right. Strong species dominated weak ones. Violence was the final arbiter of disputes. Justice was whatever the powerful said it was. Humanity had introduced a different concept. That strength came with responsibility. That power should protect the innocent, not exploit them. That justice was not negotiable based on political convenience. The old council had been a debating society, where the strong made decisions and the weak accepted them. The new council, meeting in the human-built station, operated under human-enforced rules. Every species had an equal vote. Decisions required majority approval. Military action against civilians was absolutely forbidden. Some called it tyranny. Humanity ruling the galaxy through superior force. But it was a strange kind of tyranny, where the rulers spent most of their time protecting those who could not protect themselves. Admiral Stone stood in the command center of the UES Retribution, watching displays that showed human forces scattered across known space. Hundreds of ships, thousands of personnel, all working to maintain the peace that humanity had imposed on the galaxy. Status report, he ordered. All sectors report normal operations, replied his aide. The Corvin-Altarian trade dispute has been resolved through arbitration. The Trilaxian government has submitted their new mining regulations for approval, and the Zaphirian reconstruction program is ahead of schedule. Stone nodded. The Zaphirian Empire was slowly being rebuilt as a productive member of galactic civilization. Their military was gone, replaced by human-trained peacekeeping forces. Their government was being restructured with human advisors, ensuring that future leaders would not repeat the mistakes of the past. It was working. The galaxy was more peaceful and prosperous than it had been in centuries. Trade flowed freely between species that had once been enemies. Scientific cooperation was advancing at unprecedented rates. Even the smallest and weakest species had a voice in galactic affairs. But Stone knew this peace was built on fear as much as hope. Fear of human military power. Fear of what would happen to those who returned to the old ways of exploitation and violence. Admiral, his communications officer called out, We are receiving a priority message from the Outer Rim territories. The hegemony is requesting assistance with pirate activity near their mining worlds. Response time to target? 18 hours, sir. Dispatch Task Force 7. Rules of engagement are standard peacekeeping protocols. It was routine now. Pirates, raiders, and criminals found themselves facing human military forces that were faster, stronger, and more sophisticated than anything they had ever encountered. Most surrendered without a fight. Those who chose violence learned that humanity had not forgotten the lessons of their own violent past. On the council station, Ambassador Sarah Chen addressed the assembled delegates for the quarterly session. The hall was fuller than it had ever been. Species that had never been allowed to participate in galactic politics now had seats and voices. The quarterly reports show continued improvement in trade, security, and interspecies cooperation, she announced. Piracy has decreased by 87%. Economic growth is at record levels across all sectors, and we have gone 6 months without a single interspecies military conflict. The applause was genuine, if somewhat subdued. Even former enemies of humanity had to admit that the galaxy was better under human protection than it had been under the old system. The Altarian ambassador raised his hand. Ambassador Chen, some of our people are concerned about the long-term implications of human dominance. What happens if your species decides to become the same kind of oppressors we faced before? It was a fair question, and Sarah had been expecting it. Ambassador, I understand your concern. Power does corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. That is why humanity has implemented checks on our own authority. She activated a display showing the human military command structure. Our forces operate under strict rules of engagement. Every military action is reviewed by independent observers from multiple species.